Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. In today's video, Anthony Power and I have a stacked agenda. We're going to be following up on February production results from HIVE and Soluna. In addition to that, we've got earnings out from Bitfarms. And finally, to finish things off, we're going to be going through a big announcement that just came out from Core Scientific. Now, Bitcoin is looking like it's going to hit all-time highs today to end out the week, you guys. An absolutely phenomenal session for the miners. A lot to go through, so let's get into it. But before we do, please take a second, hit the like button. It's a huge help to myself, Anthony, the channel. It's 100% free to do, and it gets this content to other people who may find value. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. We're almost at the 42,000 subscriber milestone, which is absolutely phenomenal. And finally, leave a comment in the section below. Let us know if you're holding any of these four companies, what you thought about today's coverage, and your outlook for 2024. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, another action-packed agenda. We've got Anthony Power back to help us analyze and dissect a couple of updates and an earnings release from Bitfarms. So in today's video, you guys, we're going to be looking at an update not only from HIVE, we've got Soluna, we've got earnings out from Bitfarms, and I will throw in that next week we've got Ben Ganon, the Chief Mining Officer, coming on the program. So if you guys have any questions for Bitfarms, I know that's definitely one of the more followed companies out there. Make sure you get them in. And then on top of that, Anthony, Core Scientific actually came out with a big HPC contract up to $100 million, actually rivaling what we've seen from Bit Digital. We're just putting out a video today actually with the CEO of Bit Digital, and we talk a lot about that HPC business. So a lot to go through today. Before we get into it though, Anthony, I noticed you're wearing your golf shirt today, a first on the channel. Where'd you pick that beauty up?
This is my golf shirt that I wear when I go on tour with my army buddies. So this is the Royal Army Pay Corps, a corps from an old corps from the British Army, and we go on tours every couple of years. I've been on a couple with them to Spain and to Portugal. So yeah, very enjoyable.
Nice. Are you still on the PGA as well, Anthony, or?
I've gone over to the Live Tour. There's more money involved over there, so I'm on the Live Tour at the moment, in between podcasts. You'll be seeing me all around there with the likes of, the big players and all that like that. I'm trying to get Rory on board at the moment, so, give me some time. I'm working on it at the moment. We had a few chats yesterday, but news update on Monday, hopefully.
Good. Okay. Well, we'll keep you guys tuned on the golf updates as well. Now, Anthony, back to the Bitcoin mining here. I'm sure that's what everyone's talking about. We also want to talk about Ethereum today, so a lot to go through. But let's start off with HIVE, HIVE Digital. They just put out their monthly production update. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, HIVE, from a production point of view, in terms of what they do with the machines they've got, top three miner consistently. I mean, we've talked about HIVE in 2021, 2022, and actually in terms of pretty much every metric, they were the top miner, in North America, public listed, in terms of revenues, in terms of margins, in terms of production by exahash. So they had it all wrapped up. At the same time, they were doing the Ethereum mining during that period. So that really helped their cause. When that stopped, obviously it made the company then focus on how they were going to grow from a future point of view, because that was a massive amount of revenues that dropped when the fork happened in September 2022. What we've seen them do is they're growing their Bitcoin hash rate, and as of today, the end of February, they've grown that to 4.2 exahash. They've also looked at the high performance computing, because they had a significant amount of GPUs available once the Ethereum mining stopped, and they're also going out and they're purchasing new GPUs to ramp up their HPC business. And we've seen that in their earnings. They gave out some guidance to what they're going to do over sort of like the next 12 months. At one point it was like $250,000 of revenue per quarter. Now it's $250,000 revenue, more than that per month. So I think in the last 3 months of 2023, they achieved over $1 million of HPC revenue. And their aim is to get that to more than that on a monthly basis. So aiming about 15 million for the year, which is around about 1.25 million per month. And you'd expect that to increase as well, because we're seeing bigger updates from other mining companies at the moment. We'll talk about Core Scientific later in the channel, but Bit Digital, we keep mentioning them. When we mention HPC, they've got a contract. They've been open and transparent in terms of how much they're receiving for that contract. And in February, they articulated exactly how much they received during that month, which was about just over $4 million, which ties in with that 50 million per year. So they're sort of like, at the moment, a little bit ahead of the pack. But Iris Energy are going to be hopefully, highlighting their business and what they're doing on the HPC side, because they've invested $32 million in recent months. And you don't spend $32 million unless you've got some, real potential to deliver a service with good margins. And so we'll wait to hear those. But from a mining perspective, in February, HIVE had an average hash rate of just over 4 exahash for the month, and they achieved 200 Bitcoin. So in terms of comparisons with other miners, that keeps them in that sort of like that top 3 level. So they're still getting the best out of their machines. Obviously, they had significantly more Bitcoin per exahash for the month of January, and we know that the difficulty in February, which affected all miners, was over 10%. So we are seeing a drop in the revenues for February. Also, the fact that February had 29 days as opposed to the 31 in January. So it's like a little bit of a double hit there. It's a shorter month. But they still managed to do what they do on a monthly basis. So, during 2023, only Bitfarms had a better total by month of production per exahash. HIVE were second, but HIVE were first the previous year. And in 2024, they're still in that top 3 position there. So we know that we get a good update from them. One thing they've started to do in the last previous updates is they're not spending or selling as much of their Bitcoin, because they realize, like a few of the other miners are starting to do now, with this Bitcoin price really rising, and we're talking significantly, even from the end of December to where we are now into sort of like getting close to, the second week in March, Bitcoin prices today, it's like, again, it's touching that 68,000. So, their hodl increased. They only sold, I think it was 8 Bitcoin in the month, and they increased their hodl to 2,131 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And that gives them a value at the end of February of 130 million. But if we took the value of today, so only 8 days later, that's getting closer to 150 million. So there's an extra 20 million benefit just in the last 8 days because the Bitcoin price has had another run. So they've seen, the potential in Bitcoin going past its all-time high, which it did a few days ago, and exceeding that, alongside some of the other miners as well, increasing that hodl and increasing their balance sheet. And I just thought, if the value of their hodl is 150 million, this is a company today with not a great deal of debt on the balance sheet, and the market capitalization is just over 300 million, and they've got in treasury, in crypto alone, half of that in the treasury. So it's something that people need to bear in mind when they're doing their due diligence, to look at these numbers, and their share price hasn't performed as well as some of their peer share prices, but actually they've got a good business model. They do keep the operating costs lower, in terms of percentage, when you compare other mining companies. So they've got some of the lowest. In fact, they may actually be the lowest operating costs of all the miners. That's not the lowest in terms of energy cost, but operating cost is literally all your other costs that are in place to run the company on a monthly basis. So operating costs really low. Energy costs, need some work on in that particular area there, because they are sort of like creeping a little bit above some of their peer miners. But I'm sure they've got a good team in place there. We've had Aidan and we've had Frank on the channel. They've talked about their business model. They talked about HPC. They talked about the margins potential there. So we'll keep an eye on HIVE when maybe they're not getting shown that great deal amount of love from the market at the moment in terms of what the market think they are. But I'd certainly I'd be giving people the opportunity to do more due diligence on this company. What's your thoughts, Bryce?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Anthony, because when you start to look at the market cap, Bit Digital's in a very similar position compared to the value of these digital assets. Really starts to look like there is a bit of opportunity with some of these other names. And as we talked about in the prior podcast, Anthony, I think there is a general sense in the investment community, maybe not retail or people that follow it as closely as us, but we're seeing the mining stocks pull back and decoupling from Bitcoin. And I think there are people out there that are saying, hey, the halving's coming up. There's a lot of uncertainty. The market doesn't like uncertainty. Let's just park our money in the Bitcoin ETF until we see how this shakes out. And then if we want to come back to the miners, we can. And I think that's creating a lot of opportunity specifically for some of these smaller mid-tier miners that just don't have the notoriety or the backing or the institutional investment that maybe you get with a CleanSpark, a Marathon, a Riot. So very astute observation there, Anthony. The other thing I wanted to bring up, as you start to talk about HPC, Sam Tabar was just on the program, and he actually said they have zero sales staff associated with HPC. Every single discussion, conversation, client so far has been inbound to them. So I'll be curious when we talk to Hive and some of these other players to see if that's a similar story. But from what I'm understanding, a lot of demand, very good margins, and no shortage of business or contracts available in this space. So
yeah, good point. One thing to add though about Hive is, and we got notification last week was, they finished top in a TSX Venture 50 list. So this looks at the high performing companies in the Canadian exchange, and of the companies that we follow at the moment, you had the likes of Hive finishing first. You had DMG also in that top 50, and Sato Technology also finished that top 3. In fact, DMG was second, and Sato Technology were also in that top 50 list. So, it shows at the moment that the mining companies are getting recognised on some of these exchanges as high performing technology companies. So Hive were top, and it's not the first time they've finished top in there. So obviously getting more of a more exposure in Canada, and that's the challenge for some of the Canadian miners and the non-US miners. We've talked about BitDeer as well. That they're Singapore based. Getting as much love on the Nasdaq that their peer miners, the likes of CleanSpark, Marathon, Riot, seem to do. But getting awards in Canada, that's worth it's worth people, as I say, people doing a little bit more work on some of these smaller miners to see where they're a play going forward. But it was a good update from Hive.
Yeah, most definitely. And congrats to those companies. Great for volume, great for new eyeballs on these stocks and liquidity in the names. Yeah, and just curious, Anthony, one question we've got in the comments, we'll leave this to another video, but I think it's definitely worth a discussion. As we start to see the new FASB accounting treatment in the States, it'll be interesting to see how these Canadian listed miners navigate that, whether they're IFRS compliant or if they go a different direction with that fair value, especially as you talk about the balance of those digital assets creeping up, Anthony. So great discussion there. Now the next one, another smaller miner we cover on the channel, but really a strong following actually for the size of this company, Soluna Holdings, Anthony. They just put out February results as well. What was your take there?
Yeah, I mean, Soluna, in terms of comparing to the rest of the miners, they're the smaller end. But actually, in terms of miners that are growing, they've shown some real growth in sort of like the last 6 or 7 months, and especially growing in the self-mining. So they are predominantly a hosted miner, and at the moment they've got about just over 1.6 exahash of hosted hash rate. They've now got over 800 petahash of self-mining hash rates. That gives them about getting towards 2.5 exahash of assets under management, if you look at it from that perspective. So not a totally small miner, but one that's probably not on everyone's radar at the moment. But we've seen the self-mining hash rate, which was only in July just over 100 petahash. That's gone up 8-fold in the last month there, and we know that they're continuing to grow in this space. So production for February itself, they were operating at 818 petahash as an average hash rate per month, and they achieved 39 Bitcoin, which actually, in terms of where they are in the tables, that sort of like puts them above midway in the table. So they're competing with some of these other miners in terms of what they're getting out of machines. So they're also doing something right. And we've actually covered Soluna Holdings sorry, have I said that right?
Soluna Holdings, yeah. But redo that little part.
And we've obviously covered Soluna Holdings in previous podcasts. We've had the CEO John on the channel, and we've covered them in updates as well. And we quite like the way they've set out their facilities. They look very, very modern, and they look well built. And obviously that's a factor. You've got good facilities producing good mining updates. And so, we'll keep a watchful eye on these. But a good update. We know they're also going into the in the HPC space as well. So we've articulated that on previous podcasts. And so, the likes of Bit Digital and Hive and Hut and many of these others of the sort of like the smaller miners, using that opportunity to go in there and look at achieving revenues that aren't correlated with the price of Bitcoin, and enable them to sort of bring some of that revenues to help them build their Bitcoin mining and hosting businesses at the same time. But a good update from Soluna Holdings.
Yeah, that's one I'm keeping a close eye on, Anthony. Definitely one of the smaller plays, but again, could be a great opportunity or great risk reward profile if you're able to get in, do your own due diligence and see what you think of that one. We'd be curious to hear in the comments section below if anyone out there is holding Soluna, your thoughts, your outlook going into halving and 2024 as well. Now, another one we've been hearing a lot of thoughts about, Anthony, is Bitfarms. Obviously, we put out a podcast earlier this week talking about some preliminary earnings from some of our favorite miners. Bitfarms actually came out, but we didn't have time to include it there, so we wanted to give them a special feature today. We've also got Ben on the program next week, so I'm really excited about that. We've had Jeff on twice. I've never met Ben, and from what you tell me, Anthony, and everyone else I've met in the Bitcoin space, the Chief Mining Officer, Bitfarms, Ben Ganon, very, very smart guy in this space, and a lot of people have said he's probably forgotten more about Bitcoin mining than most of us know. So I'm super excited to talk with him, to hear about Bitfarms earnings. But before we get into that interview, Anthony, what was your take on Bitfarms this release?
Yeah, I mean, the obviously, what you got to remember is 2023. Bitcoin mining is still sort of like in that recovery phase. We've gone through that sort of like bear cycle, and we're still recovering. And most of these miners, and actually all the miners, if you take away the fact that some have started to use the latest FASB ruling, which enables them to value their crypto at sort of like close to market values rather than only being able to evaluate when it actually goes down. They all made a loss in 2023 effectively. Very few miners made a profit. We know that Sato Technology released their results and they did make a profit, but majority of the rest of the miners will make losses. And so Bitfarms have released their results, and revenues were at 146.4 million, but they made a gross loss of 1.5 million. And so that's just the energy and depreciation. But when you think about the depreciation for Bitfarms, that was like 85 million. So, and they made, they made, obviously throughout the year, they made a total loss. But what you got to remember is there are some good takeaways from the year itself. So if you remember at the start of the year, Bitfarms were operating at about 4.5 exahash. They've increased that to 6.5 exahash, which is about 44%. And installed additional 22,000 Bitcoin miners. They've also focused on reducing their efficiency in miners as well. So they had some previously they had a lot of older miners, and at the start of the year they were operating at 39 watts per terahash. They've now got that down to 35 as at today's date, and we know that when they start installing some of these T21s, that's going to reduce, further down to 31 watts per terahash. So they are doing that in the right direction, and they've got significant amounts of miners coming this year to get to their target hash rate of 17. if they use all the options, and that 17 could actually increase to 21 exahash if they decide to repurpose some of the machines they've got already and redeploy them in their centres. They've increased their opportunities in South America and in Canada, so throughout the year, so they've expanded into all those areas, and that's going to continue in 2024, and we'll see. I mean, we're talking 6.6 exahash at the moment. They're going to have to grow 3 times that to achieve their growth strategy the rest of this year. So they are opening up significant increases in capacity in all those 3 areas. When you think about how much Bitcoin they mined in the year, they I think it's just under 5,000, so 4,928 Bitcoin in 2023. And if we look at just the cash costs, so I focus on cash costs, so remove depreciation and remove some of those other non-cash costs. The average energy cost per those Bitcoin was about 15,200 for the year. And if we take the average total cost of mining a Bitcoin, and they've acknowledged that was just under 22,000, so 21,800 to mine a Bitcoin. And obviously, as we're going into the halving, when we know that the price to mine a Bitcoin will effectively double, having a cash cost of 21,800 with the Bitcoin price at the moment means that that this company has got potential to go through the halving and be able to cover its bills, because cash flow is important. And even if you said, well, the cash cost to mine a Bitcoin post the halving is closer to 44,000 at today's price, there's still a nice margin in place there. So a good update. All the key takeaways. So throughout 2023, they reduced their debt levels. So they managed to get the debt level down to 4 million by the end of the year. And as we know from their February update, and in line what they've been saying for about 6 months, they are now debt free. So we go back 20 months ago, about August 2022, $160 million of debt on the balance sheet. February 2024, $0 of debt on the balance sheet. And if you think about interest payments on that debt last year, that was well over 2 million in interest payments. That's a cost they're not going to have to pay out in 2024. So getting rid of the debt, it's also the interest, that the regular interest payments that these companies have had to pay, those that took out the debt, and in some instances caused significant problems in that bear market. Bitfarms realised at probably about the right time, because I think if they left it any later, they could have been another Core Scientific going into sort of like insolvency protection, whatever it is in Canada. It's Chapter 11 in the US, but whatever the situation is in Canada, they could have been going into that if they hadn't have managed to turn it around and start doing things totally different. But yeah, I expect 2024 to be a far better year, for not just for Bitfarms but for all these mines, because the Bitcoin price has just been breaking all-time highs this week. And we know at the moment the likelihood is it will continue to break all-time highs going forward, certainly in the short term now. I don't know what's going to happen post the halving, but it keeps looking to want to get past that $69,000 again. I think as we were speaking before, it's sort of edging up now towards 68,500 as we're speaking at the moment. So that's an interesting part for these miners. It's revenues to them. So so from a HODL perspective, they've got 804 Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and at today's price, that's valued at $54 million, and they have quite a significant cash amount on the balance sheet as well. So doing all the right things, reducing efficiency or increasing the efficiency of their machines, having a cash balance. Also, if you go down and look at what they're paying for energy costs in South America, they've got some contracts there that they're only paying 2.1 cents a kilowatt hour, plus VAT on top of that. But that puts them into that sort of real low cost contracts that we've seen through the likes of Cipher, through the likes of TeraWulf, and also if you managed to listen to the podcast with Jason last week, Riot have got some of their energy prices down into the low 2 cents a kilowatt hour. I think he quoted 2.2 cents, and people are wondering why they're not mining enough. But if you can get your energy price down to that level, that's obviously going to help you, going forward and help your results. So, but Bitfarms, yeah, they're we'll get better figures from all these miners in 2024. 2023 is still recovery. And the fact that they haven't got a significant hodl, and I'm not sure if they're using if they're using the rules to have Bitcoin at the current prices. I'll do some investigation and come back on a future podcast and explain that when we discuss that further. But overall, a lot of good points for 2023. Not the results that everyone expected at the start of the year, but bear in mind, every miner bar a couple, we're going to have losses in for that particular period.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the 2.1 cent power contract, Anthony, and the debt, because I remember my first interview with Jeff talking about the goal of being debt-free by halving, and seeing that management was able to deliver on that is pretty special. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up, Anthony, I'm also feeling a general sense of optimism in the miner sector. We're recording this Friday morning on March 8th. I have a feeling we're going to see all-time highs today as that Friday FOMO kicks in, right? People don't want to be left out over the weekend. But yeah, from Riot, we heard the same thing. A lot of new exahash coming online, very optimistic year. And the nice thing here is it's kind of a win-win, I guess, for these miners. If the Bitcoin price continues to go up, obviously that helps revenue, but global hash rate or global difficulty will remain high, likely post-halving as well. However, if we see a pullback in the price, that'll reduce the global hash rate post-halving and make it a little bit easier on those miners. So either way, they're going to have good Bitcoin price and high difficulty, or a little bit lower Bitcoin price but lower difficulty, hopefully kind of helping to offset some of the impacts of that halving. Now, Anthony, as you go through, you talk about they're increasing their efficiency. I just wanted to make sure that's clear for everyone. So as the machines become more efficient, the joules per terahash metric actually will go down. So sometimes you'll hear us saying increasing efficiency or decreasing efficiency. Just depends which kind of side of that equation we're talking about. Now, the next point here, Anthony, we've talked a lot about Bitcoin price hitting all-time high. Ethereum is kind of, I guess, next in line. There's a lot of discussion about pending ETF approvals, when and if those will happen. And some of the miners we cover have pretty strong, pretty strong exposure to Ethereum itself, specifically Bit Digital. We just talked to yesterday. They have a massive reserve of Ethereum that they're actually staking to receive a monthly yield. Sam Tabar, the CEO, is very bullish on Ethereum. So Anthony, I know we talked primarily about Bitcoin, but where do you see the Ethereum market going here? There's a lot of discussion about that $4,000 mark. And from there, really the sky's the limit, kind of like what we're seeing with Bitcoin breaking those all-time highs. Do you think we're going to see any other companies get involved in this space? Or do you think this is getting a little bit too far down the crypto rabbit hole for some of these pure play Bitcoin companies?
Well, I think the majority of the Bitcoin miners now will be focusing on mining Bitcoin or doing like the high performance computing. But Bit Digital have got this significant amount, and it's well over $50 million in treasury. In fact, their Ethereum treasury position is higher than their Bitcoin treasury position, and so they've got well over, I'm going to say it must be edging towards 110 million in crypto on the balance sheet. But the Ethereum has been sort of like now keeping up in terms of in percentage increase with Bitcoin, and we've seen the impact of the spot ETF improve the Bitcoin price. Well, you've got the Ethereum ETF coming up in a few months' time, and if that goes through as expected, what impact will that have? And we've seen the likes of Mike Alford, who's a commentator, a content provider in this space, and he recognizes that Ethereum's heading towards probably 4,000 today, and as we're talking now, it's literally $20 away from 4,000. So it's likely it's reached 4,000 today, and he thinks it's there's no reason why it can't go significantly higher. He's even quoting don't if it gets to $10,000, but then we don't sort of like give any price guarantees on the channel here. We look at where it is at the moment, and we look at the history of where it's been. But we're seeing both of these major coins in the crypto space, and when we say major coins, we're talking about together they are effectively, 65, 66% of the total crypto space in terms of market capitalization. So when you say there's 13,000 plus different coins out there on exchanges, these two take up 65%. So Bitcoin is just under 50%, and Ethereum is probably 16 or 17%. I haven't checked in recent times, but it's going to be at least that, because they've both done really well over the last few weeks. So getting closer to 70% of the whole market. And so you've got, the other 13,000 coins added together make up the remaining 30%. So, for me personally, I have a little bit of Bitcoin and I have some Ethereum as well. And I don't have any other coins, because I've done, the last 3 years, I just look at these two, and I'm not saying there are any other valid coins, but these are the big players. These are the sort of like, in sort of the analogy, these are the Manchester United and the Real Madrids of the football world. So, in terms of valuation, the big clubs out there. We'll probably get a load of comments now about football in the comment space, because people who have their own football teams out there. I might have missed out one or two, like Blackpool or Preston or whatever. So,
no,
we'll see what people put in the comments there. But no, I think as long as Bitcoin's going up there, Ethereum seems to be tracking it quite well. And on certain days, Ethereum's percentage increases has outplayed Bitcoin. So it's the ETF's coming up. That'll play an important part. But it's great for Bit Digital, because, like you say, they've got a significant balance to the balance sheet there. And when you think about Bit Digital's market capitalization, it's a little over 200 million, and they've got about, including their cash, they've got probably close to 150 million in sort of like, in cash and treasury alone. Never mind adding in then the valuation of their machines, facilities, etc., etc., etc. Some of these miners just aren't getting the same sort of like, from the market perspective as maybe some of the bigger miners are getting. So always do your due diligence. Look at all the miners. Do some investigation. Check the numbers, because there are some probably gems out there that needs to be looked at in a bit more detail.
See, you British guys always go to football references. I was going to say gold and silver, Anthony, but yeah, Sam did a great job of articulating Bitcoin as a store of wealth, and then Ethereum with their smart contracts and all the versatility and technology there, really offering a lot of alternatives for current banking system and versatility to be used kind of on a more daily transactional basis than Bitcoin. So that'll be one to watch for sure, but definitely like the exposure. I too hold a little bit of Ethereum, only half of one coin, but that's what I'm watching and starting to hear a lot more about. Now, to take things home here, Anthony, another thing we're hearing a lot about, general theme today, HPC, high performance computing. You almost have me saying HPC now, Anthony. But Core Scientific just came out. They announced up to $100 million contract extension with a company called CoreWeave. So this is a company they had an existing relationship with. They've extended that contract for up to 16 megawatts worth of their data center infrastructure capacity. This is going to be based in their Austin data center, which is a tier 3 data center. We've talked about that on the channel before as well. All of these data centers have different levels of security and cleanliness and I guess preparation that's involved, to the extent that some of these tier 3 ones, Anthony, you could literally eat off the floor of these places. They're immaculate. So Core Scientific making a big statement, and I gotta wonder, we've heard Sam and Bit Digital say, hey, it was 35 million, now it's 50, potentially up to 100, and Core Scientific comes out and says, hey, you know what, we'll see your 100 and we'll match you 100. And to my earlier point, no shortage of customers here, no shortage of money in this space, and we're now starting to see some of these Bitcoin miners really coming out and landing some major transformational contracts here, eh?
This was an interesting update, because I think we said on previous podcasts, we didn't expect the big four to go down this route.
Exactly.
And I think it was a recent podcast, so we're not even talking like a week ago. And we've seen literally every mid-tier and and some of the smaller miners all sort of look at HPC as a way of bringing in these revenues, because we know that the Bitcoin in previous cycles, and it doesn't mean it'll happen in the future, but in previous cycles there's been a bull and a bear cycle, and so when you're navigating through that, it becomes a real challenge as to how you're going to grow, when's the opportune moment to grow. it looks like we're going into a bull cycle now, and people might be thinking, I need to grow, grow, grow. And we've seen the likes of CleanSpark and other miners, Iris Energy, who've managed to grow during the bear cycle in readiness for the bull cycle. So, high performance computing is I would have said none of the top four would have done that. They would have focused on mining, but Core Scientific obviously feel there's some benefit in going down this route, and it'll be interesting to see the updates when they come out showing the revenues coming through and the margins they're going to be able to achieve. Because at the end of the day, margins will be what they're monitored on. It's no use having 100 million contracts if you're spending nearly 100 million in terms of energy costs and all the other costs associated with getting facilities to that level. Because you're quite right, these facilities for HPC are different from what your facilities for mining is. Like you say, they're clean. There's no contamination, and people wear clothing and all that when they're in them sort of spaces. So there's no dust. The uptime in these facilities has to be something like, I think it's quoted as like 99.9996%. Effectively 100%. So curtailment is there. You can't have curtailment in these facilities because when you're supporting AI services, it needs to be 24/7. It's a bit like saying in your home there, how often do you want your broadband to be working? And when it goes down, believe you me, how upset do you get when the broadband goes down in your home even if it's for like 5 minutes, or it drops off, or you're having a call with a friend in another country, and all of a sudden you can't hear what they're saying because your broadband's not working correctly. For these AI services, it has to be sort of like seamless. There's none of this and that's why the percentages in these contracts are really high. So these miners that are going into this, they know they have to deliver on that, because there'll be clauses in the contract where there'll be penalties applied if they don't. And so CORZ, in terms of what I would say is a big Bitcoin miner, they've got getting towards 20 exahash in self mining, over 6 exahash in hosted mining. So assets under management getting 25 exahash, 26 exahash. For them to come out with this announcement, that sort of makes you think, now is anybody else in that group going to start looking at this, or do they believe? Fred Thiel, the CEO from Marathon, still believes it's a short-term play. It doesn't seem the longevity. But we had those people come out, 30 years ago and said that the web would be short-term play. That wouldn't last long. So, it'd be interesting to see, with the likes of NVIDIA and what they're doing, is this a long play in the market, and are these miners rightly going into this space now? So time will tell. But a good update from Core Scientific.
Yeah, and just a side note there, Anthony, CORZ one, we've got a lot of attention and questions about, so we're going to be including them in our analysis going forward. We're also working to get the CEO, Adam Sullivan, on the channel to answer some of these questions. Yeah, I personally don't think HPC AI is a flash in the pan or short-lived at all. My only concern with this is how to compete with some of these big Amazon, Google, Meta type of companies, right? And obviously, if there's that much attention, money, margins in this space, you got to think that some of those blue chip behemoths are going to be in there and pretty aggressive with their pricing and all that. But we will see as time shakes out, Anthony, like you said. And a great example, you and I both thought the big four wouldn't get into this space, and now a week later they did. So that's exactly why you guys need to do your own research. This is not financial advice, and this is our opinion or take on what we see in the space at this point in time. So you guys, thanks so much for watching today. Anthony, I'll kick it back to you for any closing thoughts. Great discussion, great way to end the week. And hopefully by Monday, we're sitting at new all-time highs for both Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah, I think that's imminent now. Bitcoin, is close to 69,000. Ethereum's only $8 away from 4,000. So I'm without looking at the chart itself, I'm led to believe that's probably reached 4,000 there. Let's see if it maintains that, because when we saw the Bitcoin price hit 69 earlier last week, the price dropped, well over 10% in the space of a few hours. So whether a lot of people had their buy or sell orders in as an all-time high was reached to try and take some profits, but we've seen the ETF funds are just eating up the Bitcoin on a daily basis. That has not stopped. That has not slowed down. And actually now it looks like BlackRock are going to overtake MicroStrategy in terms of their Bitcoin holding. in the next 2 days. That's how close they are. That's how much they're doing on a daily basis. So, MicroStrategy had probably the single largest Bitcoin holding from a public listed company, close to 200,000. And we know that Michael Saylor, the CEO, has gone out and looking to buy even more. So they're raising, I think, another 600 million, if I read rightly, last week to buy more Bitcoin. He's not stopping buying Bitcoin. He's been absolutely positive for the last 3 or 4 years and never detracted from that statement. Even when the Bitcoin price got down to $15,000 in December of 2022, he's been buying Bitcoin all the way through. And you look at now, he's took a company, MicroStrategy, that had a fairly small market capitalization to one that's now well over, I think, $10 billion. The play has absolutely worked out for him, and all the pointers now suggest that Bitcoin's the adoption of Bitcoin, these ETFs that are buying on a massive basis. It took, I think, 2 years for the gold ETF to achieve the level of investment that these Bitcoin ETFs have achieved in 2 months. So that's just putting it on a par there. How far it goes, I'm not an expert on that particular space there, but I'm holding on to my Bitcoin and Ethereum for dear life, and not prepared to sell it at the moment. But yeah, let's see what the weekend brings, and look forward to catching up the next podcast next week, Bryce.
Yeah, you talk about the ultimate hodl or diamond hands. That's our good friend Michael Saylor, and he's actually speaking at Bitcoin Nashville alongside you, Anthony. You're a speaker right alongside our good friend Michael Saylor there. So
hopefully on the stage together, Bryce. Hopefully on the stage together.
Yeah, I thought maybe he'll just follow your speaking engagement there or whatever, add a couple notes. Now, the other thing I was going to say before we wrap up here, I just heard a couple new things too. I've seen BlackRock, they're now starting to hold the Bitcoin ETF in some of their own global mixed funds, right? So if you get a diversified fund, the global exposure or whatever, they're starting to hold Bitcoin in some of those. And I've been hearing rumors, again, nothing confirmed, seen on Twitter or X, but we may start to see some nation states, some countries, some governments, some blue chip companies starting to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets as well. So if and when that does happen, obviously that's going to increase the buying pressure on the whole ecosystem here, Anthony. So we'll see. Again, no shortage of news ever in this space, but we appreciate your time as always. Anthony, Bitcoin's close to all-time high. That's quitting time for me. I think it's happy hour here for the weekend. So we'll see you next week. Thanks so much. You guys, if you're still watching, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We're just about at 42,000 subscribers, so we appreciate the support. And leave us a question below if you have any, or comment on the stocks we talked about in today's video. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.